Welcome back to Tiny Blue Games. My name's of course Csaw or Chris, and today we're talking about Guild Wars 2 in 2024. And I've been away this month, as always is the case, and man has there been a lot of exciting news for Guild Wars 2. For those of you who have not heard, and I'm sure if you're at all tied into Guild Wars 2, you probably have, the 5th expansion for Guild Wars 2, the Janthir Wilds, has been announced, which is what we're going to be talking about in this video. Just before I do, though, I should mention I am a Guild Wars 2 or ArenaNet partner. Does that mean I won't say the bad about Guild Wars 2? No, I'll say the good, I'll say the bad, I'll say the boring. But what it does mean is that you will see 2 referral or sponsored links in the description section below. You can use the first of those links to try the game for free, and it does help out my YouTube channel. You can also use the second one to buy any of the expansions, which again does support me as a creator. Now that that's been said though, let's jump into the video. So there's a whole bunch to talk about, and I don't really know where I'm going to start. I also know that a lot of other content creators for Guild Wars 2 that are much more dedicated than I am have already probably spilled all of the details. I'm sure there's multiple hour-long wooden potato videos about this, so we should be good about the nitty-gritty. Really, I want to focus on some of the most exciting things here, the core features. I will mention right off the bat, I guess one of the core features is that we are getting spears, which is super, super exciting. All of the classes are getting the spear. It's a legit new weapon. I mean, yes, it's an underwater weapon that has existed, but it is legit a new weapon. Like in past expansions, it has been weapons that other classes can use that new classes got. This is different. This is new. This is exciting. It makes a lot of sense. People for a long time thought that if we were ever to get a new weapon, it would be a spear or one of the underwater weapons, just because there are so many models in the game already. So it makes a lot of sense that way. What I did not expect is that every single class would get access to it. I think it makes a lot of sense. They're doing that instead of elite specs, which I would say in this expansion relative to the previous little expansion, the Secrets Obscure. I should mention that. I haven't even said that. This is still one of the little expansions, and in terms of timeliness, we are getting this like right when we should be getting it. So they are pumping out content in fashion as to how they said they were going to start doing these little expansions. This is the second of them. And yeah, no elite specs again, but I would say that there's been very little talk about it, mostly because this is the second expansion without it. This is not the first expansion without elite specs, which is one of the reasons the Secret of the Obscure was, it was such a hot topic. But also I do think that the spear is exciting enough that a lot of people are pretty okay to give this a try and see what it's like. But the big reason I jumped to spear is because they are doing a beta event for the spear. It's happening this weekend where the video is launching. So if you're watching this a couple days late, it might already be over. But you should be able to see lots of footage of people trying the spear, and that's what will be in this video throughout the whole thing. Me just going through all of the different classes, trying the different buttons, seeing what they do, probably using them not correctly, but having a lot of fun with it. So later on in the video, once we go through some of these other features, I'll talk about some of my first impressions with the spear and which classes I really think enjoy the spear and really stood out to me. But so yeah, we jumped right ahead to the spear. The expansion is called the Janthir Wilds. We are going to the wilderness of Janthir. This is very exciting, mostly because we finally get to escape the realm of darkness and demons and sadness and bleakness that has been Guild Wars 2 for so long. I am very excited to touch the grass in Guild Wars 2 again, and really experience some of the beautiful wilderness shots that they show in the trailer. It looks really stunning. I'm someone who loves more northern climates, and it just looks like a lovely place to be, to live, if you will. And that's kind of where we're going to be going here in just a second. But before I do, I will say that there are some Codan that have been Codan. I'm sorry if I'm disrespecting them. These are the polar bear people that we have seen since the base game of Guild Wars 2. Maybe in Guild Wars 1 too. I do not know. I've never played Guild Wars 1. I don't know. But they certainly existed at the base start of Guild Wars 2, and they've been a very exciting race for me. Again, liking the North, liking bears. I've always been excited to learn more about them and to be a part of them in some way. I even have a code and tonic on one of my characters that lets you fight as one. I don't know. I feel like them being added as a class is like so, or a race is close, so close you can touch it. The issue obviously is, though, if it's a tonic, I feel like you can use it on any. I know there is some jankiness with the tonic, so I feel like if they were to add it as a race, they need to do some work, and obviously they didn't, because that would be a main feature. But yeah, the Coden are there. That's exciting enough. There we go. But yeah, like I said, it feels homey, and we're going to be able to use homesteads, which are player housing coming to Guild Wars 2. This one is really exciting because I'd say it's a pretty major feature for them to be adding in these little expansions. Even if like it was back in the day when we were doing Heart of Thorns and stuff like that, announcing player feature or player housing would be a massive feature to announce. And it's something that we've seen in a lot of different MMOs, but notably isn't done in World of Warcraft, actually, which I'd say now almost all MMOs that are kind of in that top 5 area have player housing. I mean, I guess yeah, or there's probably some that don't, but a lot of them do. So it does put a lot of pressure on WoW to look at that one day. But yeah, I think it's a very natural fit for Guild Wars 2 that is so focused on customization and letting players express themselves. It obviously is going to draw upon some of the existing feature that it was Guild Halls is Guild Halls. I know they're adding a lot of new functionality to this by the looks of it. It is just one like player housing model that you get from what I understand. But you get to customize it and really have fun with it, which is really cool. It looks like there's an inside your house, outside your house. I feel like, you know, this is a lot of groundwork that will be done. And if it's an exciting feature for many, it makes a lot of sense for them to just have a new homestead that you can get in like future expansions or patches or something like that, right? It's kind of one of those things that once you build it, the ways you can go with it are so endless. So it'll be exciting to see how well it's done. Obviously, that is a big question because there are some games where player housing was literally the best feature I could talk about, looking at you, Wildstar, and some games where it's, you know, it's there, but people don't use it as much as, you know, other parts of the game. So we'll see. We'll see. I'm someone who'll probably use it a bit. It definitely depends on if there are reasons for me to use it, like if going there gives me buffs, gives me portals to places, gives me functionality, or if it is truly just for cosmetic purposes, how cool those cosmetics are. You know, there's a lot of questions there. But yeah, there you go. The next one is all about war claws. So again, similar to the previous smaller expansion, the Secrets of the Obscure, where they focused on the sky scale, it looks like they are focusing on war claws. And this, before we even get into the war claw, really makes a lot of sense that they're stepping back and they're like, let's take an expansion to really focus and polish up some of these existing mounts. I think some of the specifically probably ones that are either janky, were harder to get for certain people, or that they saw a lot of possibilities in terms of how they could be expanded upon, which I would say the sky scale fit a few of those criteria. As before the expansion, I never used the sky scale, and during the expansion, I used the sky scale a lot. I think that'll be similar to the War Claw, which was exclusively, I believe, just a world versus world mount. I don't think I've even ever ridden on a War Claw, and I would hesitate, but I probably would say there's a large audience in Guild Wars 2 that doesn't really do world v world, that probably hasn't been on a War Club much either. So there's probably a lot of opportunity for it to feel very fresh for people, which is, I think, a really cool thing. And then it probably also works with the environments that they want to play with and stuff like that. So I think this way of tackling mounts and kind of zazzing them up a bit without it being a full new mount is working quite well for these smaller expansions. And I feel like they have at least a few more mounts that they could go through. Just hoping I get my roller beetle, which I know everyone has a roller beetle. I don't know if I just wasn't playing, I think, when it, like, initially that was kind of a big mount to go and get. So I'm hoping that one of these expansions is like the Roller Beetle expansion, and that's where I'll shine. But I'm excited for the Warclaw itself. All right, time for the big one, or at least the big one for me, and that is raids. Oh my god, raids are returning to Guild Wars 2. You've probably seen a lot of people talking about this. I know a lot of content creators looking at Wooden Potatoes, looking at Mighty Teapot, and countless others have been waiting for raids to return, or have hoped, I guess. I think a lot of us, and okay, so I'm very excited for raids, but I'm a little peeved about this because this is the most Guild Wars 2 decision you could ever make. They went so far down the strike mission tunnel or thought path that I think myself and any raid believer from many years ago had given up on them, had been like, okay, yeah, they're going down the strike mission path. You know, let's just see what kind of bosses they can do here, see how good they can make strike missions. But no, look at that. They're 180ing, they're back to raids. Very Guild Wars 2 of them. I mean, I am a little frustrated by that, but I'm also so excited because back in their heyday, back in Heart of Thorns, raids in Guild Wars 2 might have been the best experience of a raid in any MMO I've ever played. It was just so good. The encounters were fun, they were unique. There was a lot of everyone learning together, which I know is always hard to recapture, and I doubt these raids will necessarily do that because there's already been so many raids in Guild Wars 2's history now. But even just the way that they're able to tell stories in those raid instances was so well done. And I think that's what a lot of people who were raid supporters over the years has latched on to, is that some of the best stories that we cared the most about happened in these raid instances because of how they could tell the story. And it is one of the reasons that so many people disliked raids, is that they weren't able to accessibly get into these story instances without having to do the raids themselves. But Guild Wars 2 has a solution for that this time, with not only just the regular raid difficulty level for these raids, but an open world difficulty level that will make these raids approachable for pretty much everyone, which allows them to really steer away from what I assume was the main reason they turned away from raids, was the fact that such a small portion of the audience probably was doing them for how good they were. So hopefully this works really well and we see them continue to do raids. It does make me wonder if this is a huge success, if we'll see strike missions in the future, or if we'll see kind of like them alternate. I think there is a magical world where they have these 1-year expansions, and they have at different times throughout it a raid release, a fractal release, and a strike mission release. And that would feel like a pretty good amount of content. I just don't know if Guild Wars 2 can actually make that work. But if they could, that would be very powerful indeed. So we'll have to see if that happens. But yeah, I'm excited to see what they do moving forward with this. So with all that, I think we touched on all of the other features I wanted to really just give a shout out to. Let's talk a bit about the spears. Like I say, it is a beta weekend. If you are watching this right as it comes up, you can go right into the game on a free account, on a account that has the expansions, and you'll see some spots to make some beta characters. And before anything, and I think I've said this in previous betas and stuff like that, like the ease of getting into this beta and like actually, hey, just make a character and you have a beta character that's like in the real world, has made me do Guild Wars 2 betas 1,000,000 times more than I've done any other MMO beta. And I'm interested in MMOs, I really am, but sometimes the difficulty of actually downloading a beta client or doing all this work to get into it, I'm just like, I'll just wait for it when it comes out. But there are so many people playing these beta characters because of how they're so accessible. It's a really good system. I would check it out if you are at all interested. But yeah, looking at spears generally, I think they felt really good. And one of the things that I was most concerned with each class getting it was that all of a sudden we were going to have, some classes that felt very similar to each other when using the spear, or we're going to have the spear not work like on a certain class, like feel very janky. But I think they found a really good way to make it work for each of the different classes. And it's really cool because there's implementations that are very clearly more complicated if you were looking for that, and much more simple if you're not. So if you're just a spear lover and you're like, I want to play spear, you have so many different ways to go about doing it, which is really exciting. What I am curious about is that, if Janthir Wilds is literally just going to be like armies of people with spears and that's like all we see, but worse things could happen. So we'll see what happens. In terms of how it feels on classes, I think a few things that I saw across all classes was that the spear could often be used as, both a ranged and close ranged or melee weapon, depending on the skill. So a bit of flexibility between the two. That's not for every single class, but there were quite a few where there was a bit of flexibility between close range and far away. And then a lot of mobility in terms of gap closers, in terms of charges, in terms of projectiles that you stun and stuff like that. There was a lot of mobility that way that I think was really cool. So generally speaking, that applies to all classes. Looking at some of the specific classes, some of the things that I really liked were the engineer. I thought a lot of the skills looked really cool. They had this mechanic that kind of treated the spear like a lightning rod that would charge up, and then you'd have this really charged up spear that you could kind of launch at another enemy. And it felt very like it was a really cool way to use the spear, but also tie it to what an engineer would do, which I think is really cool. Rangers had beautiful animations, and then had the ability to stealth and use stealth skills very much like is it Thief or Rogue in this game? I think it's Thief. I play too many MMOs. But they had all these skills 1 through 5, and then you could go stealth with I think the 5th one, and then you'd have a bit of different functionality with some of your skills. So you could have a much more bursty ranger play, which I think is kind of cool and gives them some more play. I know they do have some stealth too. I think it's the longbow that has stealth on ranger. So you have some ways to be a much more sneaky ranger, which I do think fits with class identity for rangers. The Mesmer just had a ton of beautiful animations. It's one of those things where I really disliked Mesmer at the start of Guild Wars 2, and a lot of these new weapons, these new elite specs have made me fall more in love with the class, and specifically its style over time, which I think is really nice. The Thief itself, when I was talking earlier about simplicity and complexity, had a very complex way of using the spear, or at least I thought it was quite complex, but maybe someone's like, oh, this makes perfect sense. But what it had is instead of the first attack having like kind of just a chain of attacks that you just keep pushing one to go through, both the second and third skill had essentially 3 different combo chains that you could do. But what's interesting is like you could treat 2 or 3, like the skill button, as your starter, and then you could then choose to do skill 2 or 3 as your middle skill, and then again choose to do skill 3 or 4, or no, 2 or 3 again as your final. So you could kind of, like, there's a lot of branching combinations you could do. And I think some of them were more offensive, some of them were more defensive. There was a lot of really cool things you could do with it, which I thought was really nice. There was also a block skill that you could just keep using with your initiative. And I thought that paired with the ability to dodge as much as thieves do is just going to make some very irritating encounters with thieves in PvP, which is already something they're known for. So there you go. Revenants also had beautiful animations. I really liked the colors they had. It felt very Revenant with the spear, which is nice. And then they also had this skill that pulled people into the middle of it. Very similar to the Mesmer's, is it Focus? I think Focus 4 that does it. I might be wrong about it. But that's always been such a powerful skill in gameplay because stacking up enemies is so powerful. It's really nice to have another class that has it, and there might be other ones that I am unaware of. But when I saw that, I was like, oh, it's going to be really nice to have that on a Revenant. And it's one of the reasons that and the beautiful animations is making me consider Revenant to try out this spear. Another class that I've never really played too much with, so it'd be exciting that way. The last one I'll talk about, because otherwise I'm pretty much just going to list all of the different classes, is the Elementalist. They had a lot of different long-range weapons or attacks you could do with the spear. But the cool thing here was that, the way you transitioned between the different elements allowed you to kind of make different combinations with the skills, which I think is something that they've played with before, but did feel very good on the spear itself. It was also obviously a way for them not to have to make literally 20 different skills for the spear on the Ellie, because some of them are just almost the same but do slightly different things. And it felt really good. It looked really nice. At the end of the day, I really loved playing Elementalist with a staff back in the day when I was, doing Gorseval and those kind of things, and Staff Ellie was such a thing. It would be interesting for me to find a Ellie build that really brings me back to that world again. So we'll see. We'll see what we see. But yeah, that's my kind of first thought of the Janthir Wilds. I'm very excited. I'm obviously going to play it. I do think I'll continue playing Guild Wars 2 at my kind of casual pace, which honestly is what the game is designed for. I think, I still, with these smaller expansions, with them, costing a lot less than most games expansions these days and not having a sub fee, it's you get so much content for so little. It's just, the game is just so much value. It always is. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about the Janthir Wilds below. Are you excited for this expansion? What feature has you the most excited? Do you want to use the spear? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.